Hi, my name is Greg Canty, and I'd like to welcome you to the Win Happy podcast. I love chatting to people from all walks of life about their lives and their careers, about the choices they make along the way to pursue their happiness, and what winning actually means to them. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I do. Thanks for listening. On today's podcast, I chat with former journalist and radio producer Christine Tobin, a new member of the Fusion Communications team. Christine has a big story, from chefing to 20 years in journalism, from Ireland to New Zealand and back again, and lots of diverse experience gained along the way. Among other things, she chats about the huge role of parents, the changing media landscape, roller skating, and why we should not shrink to fit. Let's hear from Christine. Christine Tobin, a huge welcome to the Win Happy podcast. How are you doing today?
Very good today, very good. And thanks for the invite to come and chat with you. I'm a big fan of the pod, so it's lovely to be talking to you.
What's on your mind today? What's scrambling around in your head? What are the things that are your top priorities? What stuff have you brought with you to this conversation?
Goodness, that's interesting. The first thing that comes to my head is I need to pack for camping, and I'm looking out at the rain here in Kilkenny. So that's what's coming to my head, is like, I'm not sure if we're camping. Very little, actually. I'm having a nice chilled out off day, so very little goes through my head on my days off. To be honest, I really switch off. Yeah, but I'm bringing my best self to this as well, though. So it's really good to chat. As I said, I love talking about media. I love talking about work and PR and communications and that. So it's really my passion topic. So are you a communications nerd? I think I'm a human nerd, you know. I like humans in particular. I'm one of those rare people who actually likes humans, who likes people. That's probably what brought me into journalism in the first instance, is that fascination with people and that internal world and just how everything operates, how people, what they bring to life and to society. That and a sense of kind of social justice, misguided or otherwise. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the listener, just for clarity and everything else, you've joined the team very recently, a senior member of our communications team, and delighted to have you and all of that freshness and everything else. So what I'd like to do during the course of our conversation is for the listeners to get to know you a little bit, and then we'll get stuck into whatever we want to get stuck into.
That sounds terrifying and exciting all at the same time. Great. No scary questions now.
None whatsoever. So who the hell are you and where did you come from?
So I'm Christine Tobin. I'm married to a Kilkenny man. We live here in just outside Urlingford town. We live in the countryside and we've been in this house for about 4 years. It's a self-build. We built it ourselves during COVID, which was a lot of fun. And by fun, I mean very stressful. We live here with our kids, Henry and Jack. Henry is 5 and Jack is 8.
Do you like them?
They're getting to the age where they don't like me, though. I do. I still like my kids. They're not teenagers. No, I do. They're good crack. They're good fun. They're my world, really, you know. And John. And yeah, it's quite peaceful. So we live in a lovely, peaceful bungalow on a site, a lovely green site, and surrounded by cows and good neighbours. And it's a really nice community up here as well. So I've settled in. I'm originally from Kerry, from Ballybunion. But I worked in Cork for a while, and then we went to New Zealand for 7 years and came back then just before the pandemic. So I'm still kind of getting through that reverse culture shock from New Zealand. So still kind of finding myself and finding my place in the parish that I live in. So I'm very lucky to have settled in quite well, and my in-laws are awesome as well. So that kind of helps when the in-laws are nice. And so I've 20 years career in journalism, mostly print, but I did a year as well and did some stints in radio. And then, about 8 years then in comms, so that, skills that translate well. I figured that out. I think after I had my first child, I kind of softened a bit and found that the media industry wasn't really a family-friendly one. And so realised then that a career in comms is probably more aligned with my values as they were changing, as I was changing. And yeah, that's how I came to comms. Saw the light and started using my powers for good.
Tell me about
You
growing up
know,
in Ballybunion.
oh wow, interesting one, isn't it? I grew up in the main street in, 80s, 90s Ballybunion before the days of Ryanair flights and before you could hop on a ferry and have a delightful trip in France or somewhere nice. It's quite a popular place with people from Cork, from Limerick, really good holiday destination that then just went completely dead, in the end of August. You could be hanging out on the beach. The beach was full in the morning, and in the afternoon, you'd be at the casinos and having great fun in the arcades, go home for your dinner then, and then come back up again in the evening and everyone's gone home. That was quite difficult to cope with. But yes, I'm the youngest of 8 children. Um, we grew up, as I said, in the main street. My dad was an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur. He had a great mind, lovely, jolly man, great mind. And my mum was a hairdresser turned entrepreneur's assistant, you know. So she was diagnosed with MS when I was just 1, actually, and she had quite chronic MS as well. So she became wheelchair bound when I was about 8 or 9. So I was her carer for a long time as the only girl left. The others had grown up and moved on. So I was her carer. But she was great fun. Again, great crack, mighty woman. She was a member of the MS Society and MS Ireland, and she really loved those guys. And a well-known character at the time. So sadly, they're both deceased now. But both my parents. But yeah, great fun. It was a really fun house. We had no money. No money at all, like really raggedy poor. And I think it kind of helped us develop our creativity, So the 3 children who were raised in that environment, are all very creative writers and artists. And, and then my older siblings, there's 5 of them who were raised with the enterprise and the entrepreneurial side of things. And they're very different in character. So, yeah, and I think my childhood and my upbringing in Ballybunion definitely instilled that curiosity in me, and also that sense of justice. Watching my father being a carer for my mother gave me a sense of like, hang on a second, this isn't right. He should have more support. Like, I knew that from an early age, that there are people who have struggles in life, and these kind of quiet unsung heroes that are kind of just going about doing their day, but they're actually amazing. So I think that was instilled in me. And as I said, the curiosity about people. I would sit up in the windowsill with my dad 2 o'clock in the morning in the summer. He'd let me stay up when I was a teenager, and we'd watch just the amount of people. There could be 1,000 people coming up from the Atlantic Hotel. They'd be coming up from Stockton's Wing or the Stunning, or these massive bands, because the Atlantic was such a big venue back then. It's level to the ground now, but back in the day, they'd come up and there was 2 or 3 chippers, and they'd be all opened until 3 o'clock. And you'd watch all sorts of shenanigans from the window. There'd be drug dealers in the 90s when all that carry on, and fights, these girls kind of hitting people with handbags. And it was just so entertaining, and it was just so much fun to watch. Like, people watching became one of my favorite hobbies, and that curiosity. So I think it all started then, watching people. So yeah,
Yeah.
so it was a fun childhood. It was fun. It was interesting.
Are mum and dad gone a long time?
20 years now.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
Yeah. My dad had a brainstem stroke during an operation. He was a carer for my mum as well, and used to be lifting her around, and it's just, yeah, it was a bit much on his heart. And my mum, yeah, sadly passed away 2 years after him. They were very close. They were good little lovebirds, So possibly of a broken heart. Yeah. So
probably.
yeah, very sad. It happens. Yeah,
Yeah.
it happens. It happens. Yeah. So
what do they leave you with?
What did they leave me with? Oh, what did they leave me with? Great memories, really great memories of my childhood and my personality. I can see a little bit of both of them in me. They were big, big personalities, despite all of their challenges, despite everything that they had to face, that they had to overcome individually and as a couple. I just feel like what they gave me was worth way more than if we were a wealthy family. Communication is what I saw. I remember listening to my parents, and my room was across from theirs, and my mother would be giggling constantly, and they'd be having their debrief. What I know now from being married with kids, when you get into bed and you're like, oh, today was mad. You have that debrief and the giggling and the messing that was going on and the laughing. And like my parents were in their 60s, and they were like I was the youngest of eight, like they were getting pushing on. To me, they were pushing on, I thought they were old. But like they always communicated. And I can't understand how they just had that unity in the face of all of their challenges, whether it be poverty, disability, illness. That's what they gave me. Is that's that understanding of this is what good looks like. Not you don't have to have all of this stuff around you, the money, the what people deem as success. Success is having a childhood and children who understand that they're loved, and a couple that you listen, partner that you listen to, and a marriage that is based on friendship. I think, yeah, because I have that with my husband now. We have the giggles and the chats and good communication.
We learn from our parents, don't we? They're the ultimate role models.
Yeah, we do as we see, not as,
Yeah.
I always think of that with my own kids. Like my kids will do what I do and not what I say,
Yeah. It's funny that you're saying that. I remember walking down North Main Street in Cork, and there was a father screaming and roaring and effing and blinding at his young kid. I'd say the kid was no more than 5. He wanted to go into a shop for a soccer shirt or whatever. And he was abusing him. He was really abusing this kid. And I remember thinking to myself, that's horrible. A little bit more of it and you nearly would have gone over and said something. And of course you get your head handed to you, I'm fairly sure, if you did say something. But what that poor kid was learning, and in no time at all, roll the clock forward and he'll be effing and blinding his children in exactly the same way, because that's what he's been taught and that's what he's experienced. So anyway, happily not in your case. What were their names?
John and Christine. Actually, the same as me and my husband, John and Christine as well. Yeah, well. I'm called after my mum. Yeah.
Yeah. So did you intentionally go out into the world looking for a John?
No, I didn't. Not at all. Actually, John on paper isn't my type at all. So, I would have always gone for the poets and the chefs and the creatives. And John is a farmer's son from Kilkenny, and he ended up in Ballybunion one New Year's night, and we got talking, and we're still talking,
That's good.
Still laughing, still talking, still enjoying each other's company. Yeah.
And your early career interests, like part-time jobs and all that kind of stuff, and your decision to do what you did, each of those steps along the way. Take me through that little journey of yours. Gosh. Yeah.
Well, I think when you grow up in Ballybunion or any seaside resort, I think you're either working as, in the case of Ballybunion, you're either a caddy at the golf club. So I couldn't do that. I wasn't into that. Or you work in hospitality. And so I worked in hospitality, cafes and what have you, and then worked as a commie chef in Cliff House Hotel in Ballybunion and did my years there and worked up. Started by washing the dishes and worked my way up, from summer jobs to being actually behind the cookers, behind cooking food. And, Sergio Garcia once gave me a thumbs up for a salad that I made him, a chicken salad there. So that was my happy moment, when I was about 20. I was pretty thrilled with that. And chefing was great. I lived in Cork City for a year as well, chefing, or a year and a half. In a bistro, and it was a really, really, really great job to have. Couldn't cook an egg for you now, of course. That's a long time ago. Just because I was a chef, I didn't say I was a good one. It was a tough career, there's a big drinking culture with that, and for me, I needed to knock that on the head as well. It was Celtic Tiger, and it was the 4 or 5 night weekends that everybody, and that's what my age was doing. And for me, I just wanted to step back, and I thought, I'd really like a quieter life, a more wholesome life. I'm not into this partying. I just want to just dial it down a bit, just go down a few gears. And, my parents had passed away. And I suppose like a lot of people when their parents pass away, it went a bit nuts for a while and then just calmed down. And I stopped drinking when I was 22. And it was just the best thing I ever did. And I reevaluated myself and I kind of said, well, what am I doing? And I think it's when your parents pass away probably as well, you get that sense of, well, hang on, I'm my own parent now and I have nowhere to fall. So what am I doing with my life? And it really made me evaluate that. So I completely changed direction at 22, which was really hard to do because nobody else got it. And I think I had to drop a lot of friends who were probably drinking buddies more so, but then the quality of life that I built for myself was incredible. It was really incredible. So yeah, I looked at, one of the things I loved doing was writing. And somebody said, well, if you make a career out of something that you love, then you'll always be happy. And I thought, well, that's nice and simple. That makes sense. So let's pursue that. And that's what I did.
So what was your first step to journalism?
I took a book out of the library, and I think the book might have been written in the 70s, but it was how to become a journalist. That was it, Actually, a step back from that, I actually put myself on a CE scheme at the time. I really wanted to work. There was a job as an usher and admin for a really good theatre in Listowel, St. John's Theatre. Really great place, working with Joe Murphy, who was manager there. And all the really great acts came, with Juliet Turner and everything from Pinter plays to school plays. It was a fabulous place. So I went on a CE scheme and I thought, okay, I'll do a little bit of a personal development course and see, and that's where I had that seed of, well, maybe I could earn a living from writing. Writing books sounded too hard. And there's no clear definitive career path there, or poetry, even though I liked that as well. And so I taught myself how to read, how to write articles from a book. And I contacted the deputy editor of the Kerryman at the time. She was actually from my hometown. So she was so impressed by the tenacity of the phone call that she invited me in for a meeting and kind of just took me under her wing and gave me some opportunities to write stories. And my first ever interview actually was Kevin McAleer. So he was doing a tour in 2004. And God bless us, I was so naive. I was so innocent. I think I had €10 left on the night that I was supposed to interview him. And he was just finishing up his show at St. John's. And Joe Murphy, the manager there, had arranged it, of this 24-year-old here. She's training to be a journalist. Will you let her interview you and she'll buy you a coffee, So we went over to the Arms Hotel in Listowel, and I was terrified. I had €10 left. My back to education allowance, I think, wasn't due till the next morning. And I thought, if this guy is a soup dragon now, I won't be able to afford to feed him with pints to get the interview, to get it all done. But sure enough, it turns out comedians are broke as well. He landed on with a bottle of Fanta in a blue plastic bag. And I was just so relieved. I was like, that's great. And we got a pot of tea. And he wasn't interested in drinking either. So I said, this is great. And I had all my questions printed out on a piece of paper. And he was really impressed. I was so I wouldn't do that now, I was so prepared. And actually, he had trained to be a journalist as well. So he was giving me loads of tips and advice. And he was such a lovely, lovely guy. He was so sweet. But then the lights went out. So there's a power outage. So we had to chat with the candlelight, and I couldn't see my notes. And I remember panicking, going, oh no, it's ruined. But I suppose if I was to go back and do that again, sure, wouldn't you love a chance to chat with Kevin McAleer for 2 hours
in the dark
and have a pot of tea? Pick his brains, you know what I mean? I grew up watching Nighthawks and his dark humor. I'd love that. You'd probably turn it into a big feature now and share it with a magazine or something. But I was just so innocent and inexperienced. But anyway, that was my first interview, and then I had, over those years, I think I've had about 10,000 more, since then. It's very much changed. I've interviewed a lot of people since then, and with the Kerryman, another opportunity came up then to do this column called After Dark. And this is where I started to probably find my voice and find a bit of humor and start to get confident. It was After Dark, and it was kind of a photography, so out and about kind of pages, photos of people in pubs and having a good night and that kind of thing, From a commercial sense, it sold newspapers, because every name you mentioned, there's 5 or 10 people who are going to buy the newspaper just to see it, before the days of newspapers going online, of course. And so I did that, and that kind of gave them a bit more confidence. And I built up my portfolio then and my work with the Kerryman before I went on to Kerry's Eye, which was the other newspaper in Kerry, the other regional paper. And it was a family-owned newspaper by the Kennelly family, and Padraig Senior was still alive at the time. He's an absolute legend in Kerry and fantastic mentor to me, as well as all of his, his sons there as well, And that's where I cut my teeth in real hard news journalism and crime reporting and courts, councils, and even obituaries for 2 years. I was writing obituaries, which was tough going, to be honest, real tough going, but interesting to have to learn how to communicate with people under such difficult circumstances as that, to learn how to read people over the phone, people who are going through trauma, people who are deeply, deeply upset at the death of a loved one. So it was a good experience, but for me, it was a bit raw because my parents had only passed away about 3 years ago. And after about 2 years, I handed it back to my editor, Colin Lacey, and I said, I can't do this. I'm in fits of tears after talking to these people. I want to call around to their house with biscuits. I just need to stop doing this, you know. And yeah, so it was just, that was good that particular part was taken. But yeah, and I trained in photography as well while I was at Kerry's Eye, which was really good. Kerry Kennelly is an award-winning press photographer. So and as Padraig Senior said, if any journalist who can write and hit a shutter button is worth gold.
Yeah, you can do both jobs.
So that was, yeah, well, it was great because you do have a lot of that creative control, I suppose. You start to see news as a package, as a visual package for people, and get a good understanding about what the reader is looking at when they look at a page, and the importance of photography as well as part of the offering for readers, you know, and as part of the narrative and story.
Yeah, it's probably a lot better than trying to brief another photographer to capture the essence of that story that you've written.
Perhaps. But I will say, you know, the photographers that I've worked with and many and managed them in newsrooms as well, you know, I find that photographers, press photographers in particular, are just amazing at understanding. And that becomes the creative collaboration, that trust that you have in each other, that trust that you have to have in a photographer to understand, you know, once they know the story that you're trying to tell, you know, being able to take your hands off and just go, right, off you go. You do you now, you be creative and, you know, put your signature on that, and can often work very well in, you know, that collaborative space as well.
The thing I loved at the start of that story that you were telling me was that tenacity in the first place that got you that interview. Is there still a role for tenacity for, you know, any young people getting stuck into different industries thinking they don't have experience and everything?
I think tenacity, from talking to some of the, I suppose, people that I know who are managing young people, tenacity is what's needed more. And maybe it's just a permission to have tenacity. You know, we live in this world where, you know, God forbid your personality is too big, or I think people need permission to be themselves and permission to be a little bit cheeky, really, and knock on the doors and say, I don't know how to do this, but gosh, can you show me? I really love this. And I think tenacity is needed at all stages, not just at that early age, right through to after you retire. You know, never lose tenacity.
Yeah, it's amazing because we've gone through a lot of recruitment lately, and I swear to God, you're just praying for someone to reach you in a fresh way. Write something that hasn't been churned through ChatGPT. Write something from your heart. Tell me why you want this role. Ignore the formula that everyone has taught you. Absolutely ignore it. Forget about that rule book. Of course you need nice CVs, and of course you need a nice cover letter. But don't be afraid to reach out in different ways and try that person, try to appeal to them. Do a little bit of thinking. Stand back and think, okay, well, how can I do this a little bit differently? How can I get that person's attention? Because we're all looking for that. Why would I take on someone who tells me they're good at writing and the only thing they've been doing up until now is chefing? Why would I give that person a job? Why would you? And it's very simple. We love the person with that bit of passion, and it is possible, isn't it?
I think it's something that you have to nurture as well. You know, maybe I just had that seed of tenacity, you know, or just that show that little bit of light, like you said. And it takes a good company. And, you know, you see that in Fusion, it's part of, you know, your mission really. It's, you know, that when you nurture that then, and like I said, you give permission and you make space for that on your team and how you communicate with your team. I think that's where you really start to see people really, really sit into that, you know, their own tenacity and own it and use it and bring it along as part of who they are.
Yeah. So Kerry's Eye, and you worked in the Kerryman, and mum and dad had passed away, and you're discovering yourself. Who were you at that point, and what were you looking for in terms of a next step?
Who was I? God, I had a very clear sense of myself, actually. I even took a year out and stopped dating. Gosh, I just wanted to just have that relationship with myself and get to know me, you know. And I was really driven actually. At the same time, I got a scholarship from the Kerry School of Music in piano, and I got that through, you know, St. John's and through my C scheme and just that relationship. And I suppose I kind of found myself driving myself forward, you know, and I just had it in my head that if I just wanted to do something, if I actually just took the steps and kept going, by God, I'd get there, you know. And it was happening for me, you know. I was starting to feel what success was like, you know. Success is in I was actually stepping into my dreams. You know, I was living a dream life, you know, living a wholesome life where I wasn't drinking. I had good friends. I had, you know, a great job in Kerry's Eye, and I worked 7 days a week, you know. I did work very hard and I put those hours in. You know, I was on top of doing my news reporting. I was also doing weekend photography work for the paper and just making as much money as I could. I bought myself a car and got my license and had my own little flat in the stole and in the life now. And then it was all interrupted by my Kilkenny man, of course. I met him. I was like, oh, disruption.
Oh, crap.
So, yeah, total disruption. Up and moved to Cork then. Yeah, so we moved to Cork then and we got engaged and moved to Cork. And I started working at the Cork Independent, actually. So back then, it's about 2009, I think, Deirdre O'Shaughnessy had joined as editor. And she was fantastic. She had great vision, really good vision of what she wanted the paper to be. It was a free sheet, which didn't have massive news quality at the time. And then she hired a team of regional journalists, of experienced regional journalists, and said, do you know what? Why shouldn't we be a good regional paper? Why shouldn't we have a good standard? Just because we're free doesn't mean we don't have value. And so that became our mission, is to be every bit as good as any other newspaper, you know, as any other regional newspaper, or better even. And so we won a good few awards. We were, you know, the inaugural headline newspaper of the year for our coverage in mental health. We did a lot of work with, I don't know if you remember, John McCarthy and Mad Pride back at the day. And we worked with Kathleen Lynch. Her portfolio was disability, and we were doing a lot of work on legislation around mental health reform and what have you. And so they gave us the very first the inaugural regional headline newspaper of the year for our work around mental health. So my reporting, John McCarthy's column, beautiful column, and some work that we did with students, a lot of work we did with students. And that was all, again, down to Deirdre and her vision for what the paper should and could be, you know. She's with the Examiner now, of course. And so she was just really good leadership. It just goes to show, you know. And again, very challenging times, you know. Recession was everywhere. I remember Darren Murphy and Tanya on a front page of one of the Cork Independents. Do you remember there was a fantastic campaign where they were doing the, you know, shush, don't talk about the recession, stop talking about it. I think there was one day where everybody was not allowed to talk about the recession. And that was in stark contrast to one of the national newspapers putting a headstone with RIP Ireland on it. I don't know if you remember that back in 2011 or 12, I think, at that point.
Yeah. I remember media in particular being so happy. It felt that way. I'm sure they weren't so happy. But it was like, okay, it's really good now to talk about so many jobs lost here. It was doomsday. Doomsday became trendy and the wheels falling off everything. And I think suddenly the industry itself realised, oh crap, this isn't serving us too well, and we need to start looking towards the positive side. I think the Sunday Tribune as well, God rest it, had a specific publication where it was positive front cover to the back cover. There was no negativity anywhere. And then suddenly you've got Apache Pizza opening on Oliver Plunkett Street and they're going to employ 5 people. Suddenly that was news. That was never news a few years ago. Yeah. Big deal. Someone opening and employing 5 people. That's not news. It became news and we needed it. And I remember, like, if you can imagine, Fusion, not so long before that, we had moved from our little small operation at home, where it was myself and Dee and Ali and Doreen, and we had a graphic designer. We're all working from the house and kitchen tables and everything else. We'd taken a lease on the South Mall. And the wheels fell off everything. And I remember a few months, a real domino effect where some of our clients, you could say, who were in kind of the luxury sector, they all just closed ranks, cancelled their work with us. It was so scary. But I remember from our point of view, we embraced social media and in particular embraced anything that was positive. I remember our signature hashtag at the time was positivity. So if you saw that ice cream shop that opened on Oliver Plunkett Street in February, you're thinking, this isn't going to last. But at the same time, we'll take a photograph, we'll wish them the best of luck, and we'll push it out. And it served us. It really, really served us well. And we didn't lay anyone off. Do you remember the austerity budget that came in then and clobbered everyone's cash, basically, with a whole layer of tax? I remember sending an email to the team that basically said, and excuse the French for any of our listeners, it was fuck the budget. And what I pledged to them is that no one's net wages was going to decrease as a result of this. So we adjusted their money so that their net wages weren't affected. Now, at the same time, I did say to them, we need to find this somewhere. And we kind of said, okay, even though there's a recession, let there be a recession everywhere else. It's not going to happen inside our four walls. And we took on a lot of speculative work. A lot of it we didn't get paid for because people couldn't afford it. I kind of knew that's just what the game we need to play for a while. We had the team, we had the capacity. It's not like we were selling kegs of Guinness and you hope they pay for them. No, it was our time. The time was paid for anyway. Yeah, so we wrote off so much. But that was what took us through at that time. I remember Deirdre O'Shaughnessy specifically coming through our door into our office on the South Mile, introducing herself. So as well as the vision, she had the tenacity to match that vision. We're the new kids in town. This is what we're going to do. And hopefully you'll give us some ad revenue. But by the way, if you've got great stories and Christine and the team and everything else, please send them on. She was amazing. She was amazing. So the wheels did come off a little bit, didn't they?
That showed fantastic leadership. I mean, I think that's probably what I saw when I first looked at Fusion. I mean, look, I've received, I think I calculated 160,000 PR pitches in my career, probably more. I stopped counting in 2019. That's a lot. Fusion always stood out, like not just patting your back here, but genuinely stood out because you were different. There was something about you. There was integrity to the relationship that you had with us. It was very honest. It was very straight. Your team, I remember Doreen and the guys, your team were great. Like they were just so straight, so honest, took time to understand our needs. And like we were still allowed to have that integrity. The two things can exist together. You can still have integrity as a journalist and actually still have good relationship with a PR company as well, and you can still have those two things. They can exist together, I do remember that leadership. And I actually remember Twitter was becoming, because, alongside all of that, social media was definitely increasing, and, in the Cork Independent, another thing that we were doing under Deirdre's leadership was tweeting, and getting online. And I think we were shortlisted for Spider Awards right there with the Irish Times and the Indo, this small little paper from Cork, who are these people, and I think we were all possibly under 30 as well. Like, who's this gang, of young ones, like breaking news and scooping the Echo, like, sorry, Anne Murphy and the gang, but scooping the Echo and the Examiner. And Ralph Riegel was a mentor of mine as well, a fantastic helper and a great guy. He used to ring me sometimes and goes, where'd you get that story? That's a good scoop, Christine. That's a right good scoop. Now you caught me unawares, and just little bits of just innovation, bringing innovation and having fun with stories. For example, like there was one story where I came back from holidays. I think I was on the plane from Tenerife or something, and picked up the Independent, and all of Cork was underwater at one stage back, when the photographs of people escaping from CUH and stuff. And just oh gosh, even saying it loud now, it sounds flippant, but it wasn't at the time, and just part of that is like, it's an unusual situation where I remember there was a White Witch of Cork, like, who had come out and said, like, it's going to go underwater. Now, I don't know, did she have access to council's information or information about flooding, or she just had a good understanding of weather? But there was weird stuff going on, But sorry, I've gone off on a tangent there. To come back to what you were saying about, those times, parallel to those challenges in business was this rise of social media as a tool that could help. And I think you guys used it to the best, of your ability. And it was seen, and people saw that, and people still remember that, For me and John, though, we had no mortgage and no kids at that point. And that is actually where we decided to emigrate, to leave Ireland, because for the media industry, and especially in regional, the money was terrible, dismal. And we definitely couldn't get a mortgage. We couldn't imagine ourselves ever having kids. Like, that didn't even come into our heads that we could have that kind of life, and we found we were just stuck. We were stuck, but we didn't have anything tying us down. So we said, well, look, let's go to New Zealand for a year.
How was that?
Wow, it was interesting. We went this time, it was actually today, actually, how many years ago? 12 years ago. We had to pull over before we reached our house to throw up. We were that nervous. The two of us just ran into the public toilets to get sick. We were so nervous about landing in this new country. And so we kind of, just one of those things where you're like, God, were we insane? Like, did we even think it through? My husband worked in the agricultural industry. He used to work with Tagas, and he decided to get a job as a farm manager in rural New Zealand. It was going to be idyllic. I was going to write my book. He was going to milk cows. I was going to make soup. It was going to be amazing. We were going to drive a tractor. It was just going to be idyllic. So I did write 11 chapters of a book, and I worked in a cafe, which was really interesting because a couple of months before that, I was interviewing the likes of Gerry Adams, and I was interviewing political flyers and what have you, and celebrities and the whole thing. And then I specifically and purposely gave myself a job, and I said, best job here is to work as a barista. I like coffee, I like people, get into the community. And we lived in a rural community as well. And I said, I'm going to work in a cafe. And I was cleaning toilets, and I wasn't even good enough to make the coffee. That would come with training, and and I experienced a lot of racism directed at me, which is weird because, being white, I suppose I would carry white privilege, but I had to experience being a minority, which was weird. And again, bringing my attention to my white privilege, it's not even half as bad as what other ethnicities would experience there. That was a bit of a shock, and having to settle into that culture. But, we did that for 8 weeks, and then we decided, a job came up as for deputy editor of a daily newspaper, and I missed the media. I could never stay away from that industry. It called to me. And my husband was glad to get out of his job as well, So we moved to the city and had a completely different life then. The 2 months in rural, a place called Wellsford in rural New Zealand was very interesting, really interesting. But we got out of there after 8 weeks. We're like, okay, this is not for us. Let's go, But we lived on the dairy farm and lived rough and lived simply and frugally for those 2 months as well. It was a good experience. Off we went to the city.
Was that experience, was it just a year?
No, 7 years. We stayed. Yeah. So I got the job as deputy editor over a team of 12 journalists and a photography department of 4. Like, we were putting out 12 publications a week, 9 publications a week. Quite a big daily paper, and part of the NZME group, which owns the Herald. And yeah, so I took that on. Again, tenacity or stupidity, I don't know. One of those things you go, yeah, sure, why not? Let's do this. It was interesting, so I was a deputy editor for about 2 years and managing that team, and then production editor and business editor after that. And it was interesting. The politics was interesting because you have your political parties, but then you also have your Maori tribes. So the tribe where we were was Ngāpuhi. They were going through treaty settlement at the time. So that was difficult to get my head around because I was looking at it from an Irish lens, where, we'll say, the Crown is not in situ, whereas in New Zealand, there is a representative of the Crown in situ. So I got in hot water where one of my journalists, had written a story using the word treason. And I let it fly because that's kind of stuff you can say in Ireland. But in New Zealand, you cannot. And there was a nearly legal battle over that thankfully we avoided. But, it was a real wake-up call to, wow, this is very different, But other than that, council meetings were the same shenanigans, the same personalities, just with different accents. People are the same, the stories are the same. But what wasn't the same is the approach to media. It was refreshing. So New Zealand media, they're happy to lead the news with a skateboarding dog, called Hamish. They would gladly do that. They understand the delicate balance of the news diet and the readers or viewers or listeners. Their need to also have news mixed with entertainment, and it falls under that do no harm approach, which is quite interesting. So, yeah, so I was part of I trained with New Zealand Herald for page design and front page design, and they had this thing, and you'll like this, it's called Project Happy, very similar to Win Happy. Project Happy was about completely redesigning the daily papers, the national paper, and all the community newspapers to balance the hard news with some lighter stuff. So there had to be, if there was a smash and grab, or if it bleeds, it leads front page, then you also had to have a photograph of a kid or something that will make somebody feel happy when they look at it, because they understood that media consumers, if they're apathetic towards news, or if the news makes them feel sad, they're not going to pick up a paper then, are they? So it was a commercial decision, but it was also based on doing the right thing in society, and definitely something I think we could look at in Ireland, so that was unique. So I did that. I was working there for 7 years.
It's interesting that they address that formally, isn't it, as a project?
Collectively as well.
Yeah, and as you said, it was more than just commercial. It was a philosophy as well around the role media plays with society. I do wonder at times when even the political parties, where they take negativity as their agenda, and all of their energy and resources are about putting a big spotlight on how bad things are. And that's okay. And everything's really bad, and they get votes if they can help to make people very angry about those particular things. But as a role in society, it isn't really good when all you're doing is making people angry and pissed off, when, okay, there might be a degree of it, but if you're putting a disproportionate volume button on those issues, it's not good. It's not good. I think, why are you doing this? This is just not good. At the immigration thing, for example, of course there's an issue. But when you have people approaching that, trying to make the general population very, very angry about it, and then everything that comes with that, then you mentioned racism, and I think people are just exploiting people's feelings around all of those things. I'm quite happy to do that, knowing the damage that it is causing society. So it was really good, I think, in New Zealand for them to think their way through that. Was media a profitable business there? You always get the sense here that if you were to pick an industry to work in, you wouldn't be picking media.
Very well paid. Yeah, very well paid. Yeah, it was. It was an industry where they invested and paid journalists quite well. They still had sub-editors, which is a luxury, I think, in some newsrooms, and it was a pretty good system, actually. They had what's known as the sub-hub. So all of the papers from the group, like I said, the national papers and magazines, the glossies, the 30-something community papers and 7 regional daily papers, of which we were one. And we had 2 of community papers as well. They were all sub-edited at a hub in Auckland, and then another one in Tauranga down south. So there was great investment there. And I think going into a different country, I think what you learn as well is, wow, look how they do things here. This is different. This is like, but they'd probably come to Ireland and go, oh, look how they do things here. So it's that understanding, but also there was vision there. And I think, to go back to what you're saying about, media, whether it's media or politics or anybody, they had a very clear purpose, and they were able to build innovation and vision on top of that purpose. They were very clear about why they existed and for whom. And I think maybe our politicians might step back and think about, well, why did I become a politician, and for whom, and what is my purpose? And, not get carried away with reacting, and just take a step back with your communications and align their comms with their purpose, and I think it always comes back to our objectives, whether it's in business or politics or whatever it is, just align that, and if it doesn't go in that direction, I suppose that's the danger in it with politics, is there's always a fight to be fought, but what weapons you choose, I think is probably up to the person. But yeah, it was invested. Now, it's not at the moment. New Zealand is going through major restructures with media, television, their news shows are being cancelled, and all of that investment is going. But I think it comes back to, we spoke about 2011, 2012 and online media. The horse had bolted. We had opened the gate. We had opened the gate for free content online, and that horse had bolted, and we couldn't close it with paywalls. It was too late. And I think really industry, the media industry in Ireland and New Zealand and all over the world still can't figure out what the solution to that problem is. So that's where they're at the moment, and as social media advertising and Google advertising and all of that rises, because it's so targeted, it's right into your prospective customer's hand on their device. You see the more traditional advertising, consumers are feeling like that's not worth their spend. But I think the right answer is probably to spread the investment of advertising across platforms, really, isn't it? That strategic visibility rather than just focusing everything on social media.
When I buy a newspaper, I learn about what's going on in the world. I flick through the paper. The team who've published the newspaper, they've carefully made decisions about how much space each story gets, where you place those stories, and if it's a huge story, you give it loads of space and you put that on the front page and so on. So you learn a lot about the world when you pick up your newspaper. I always find that on a Saturday, take the time, cup of coffee, go through whatever paper you like reading, and you will learn an awful lot. Yet on social media, and we spend so much time on it, we learn an awful lot about the one or two things that we seem to be very interested in. And even though we think we're all very well informed in everything, we're always very surprised when we pick up the newspaper on a Saturday saying, how in the name of God did that happen? I heard nothing about that anywhere else. And that's actually really quite important. So that experience in New Zealand, what did you take from all of that? What things stayed with you since?
I think it was probably the confidence. I had an editor of a very large daily paper who said, yeah, come on, lead my team. I was like, okay. I think I was 30 years of age, Yeah, that's definitely boosted my confidence and taught me a lot about managing people and how to manage people and how not to manage people also, what works, what doesn't work. I suppose I was managing and leading a team, everyone from, young reporters who were winning Reporter of the Year, New Zealand Reporter of the Year, so trying to coach them around their ambition, but also was coaching a journalist in his 70s who had interviewed the Beatles, and helping him to, the challenges of kind of helping him progress on and kind of, move with the times and, challenging his mindsets and how he does things. So that was very different, and everyone in between then as well, And as different topics and different things arose, like mental health was quite topical for a time. And then, the LGBT community, like as we grew to understand more, and represent those voices better. But that was a learning process that had started very awkwardly, and we had to learn as journalists how to navigate that and how properly to serve all of our community and the different voices. So that was a journey, it's been a journey for sure, even down to, I remember a court reporter going to interview a female Supreme Court judge. And I said, lovely guy. He was a great guy. He was from Fiji, super court reporter. And I said, oh, that's pretty cool. That'll make an interesting story. And he said, yeah, female appointed to Supreme Court. And I said, oh, hang on. I said, what? So just because she's a female? I said, you're not going to do her a disservice by not interviewing her to find out the real story, are you? I said, is that an angle now that she's a female? That's the angle? I said, surely there's more interesting topic. There must be more to her than just the fact of her gender, I mean, so small things like that, just challenging journalists to say, well, that's not the angle and I'm not putting that in the newspaper. Come back with a good angle, please, and interview her properly as you would a man and get that good stuff from her. Why did she become a judge and what's her vision for Whangarei, for the city, and so small things like that, but it's always changing, news and how we report and how we represent voices in the community is always changing, but like you talked about surveying community and how we react to news, and I have a theory on that. Our interest in news is actually based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So if you imagine maybe back in the I don't know, the deserts or the whatever, thousands and thousands of years ago, when we were all cavemen or something, the people of the tribe, whether they were male or female, would sit and scan the horizon and see what's going on, and I suppose that's the equivalent of reading the daily newspaper now and what's happening in the community. Am I safe? Do I have a job? Have I food and shelter? Are my kids safe? Can I solve the problems that I have and achieve self-actualization? So the newspapers and the media meet that need for us. So that information kind of meets that need. So I think that's why we're so interested in what the storytelling and the stories of other people and what we can learn from other people. It's our storytelling. That's how we do it these days. Very different to social media, which is very monkey brain reaction.
Yeah, back to Maslow's theory, one of the unmet needs of people, and it was one of the reasons why social media exploded, was that need to connect. And a lot of people were feeling very disconnected. And if you remember those wonderful early days of Facebook and Twitter, there were beautiful, positive communities. We were connecting in such a great, fun and exciting way. You had another follower and there were real people and you'd interact. And that connection thing, that now they're just people we shout and roar at and people you don't know from Adam, and we all have permission to say horrible things to each other. So that morphed. I don't know, is that just the human condition or whatever? But that was one of the reasons, because we were doing a lot of training at the time. Remember that Maslow's theory, and for me, that is why Facebook in particular got that particular element right, and it just, of course, it just blew up. We watched it, we were there, it was amazing. So the Control-Alt-Delete moment to wave goodbye to New Zealand, what happened?
I suppose at that point we'd bought a house, and then we'd upgraded the house to live by the sea and live by, overlooking a bay. We had two gorgeous children at that point who were Kiwi citizens. We were going for our citizenship. I think, we were residents at that point. We were very settled. I had moved over into comms as well and was, doing a contract with Northland Inc., which is like Enterprise Ireland meets an RTO, like Fáilte Ireland, a combination, which meets local authority, a kind of combination of that. So doing really good comms work and really enjoying that crossover with a little bit of journalism too, and living the life. But we used to call it the golden cage. It was just so lonely. We were so lonely. Like, we had our friends, we had, members of the Irish community, but we had no family. And we thought, what are we doing here? This is ridiculous. And I think it was when our second kid came along, we're like, we're a family. Like, we weren't just a couple with a kid, we were a family now. And we kind of thought, like, yeah, let's get out of here. Let's go home. Let's sell up and go home. And that's what we did. We just made the decision a year later. We took our time, thought it through. And before the kids started school, primary school, we said we need to make our decision now, because the pendulum was constantly swinging. And I think with the Irish community abroad as well, this pendulum swings constantly, and their heart is like Ireland, New Zealand, or wherever they are, Canada or Australia, back and forth and back and forth. And we kind of thought, like, it will never stop. It will never stop banging off the edges of our soul until we actually just make a call, make a decision, and fully commit. Do not leave the trap door open. Close the door completely. Fully commit to Ireland. And yeah, thankfully it worked out.
Yeah. When was that?
2019. Yeah. Okay. So five years.
And then, hello, COVID.
Yeah, well, we had a little bit of a break. We had a nice break. So the big shocker. So we put in an application to build a house straight away. Thankfully, John's father and parents have a farm. So there was a little acre that we could build on and, put our application through, and had done all of that, all of the work that we needed to do. That was in motion. The rental situation was terrible. We had to rent in Rathdowney, which is like half an hour away because there's no rentals. That was a bit of a shock. And yeah, it was tricky coming back, systems not working. And I suppose in New Zealand, the health system is quite smooth. Everything is smooth, it's kind of easygoing and very functional, Coming back to Ireland, we're like, oh, it's still the country we left, except maybe worse, Kind of had to get that out of our heads and stop being negative and go, it's also the place where our family are. It's also the place of roots. It's also the place where, it will be whatever we make it. So we built our house anyway, got the kids in school, saw loads of the time with family up and down to Ballybunion, loving the new network of roads. It was like, this is great. You can get anywhere from Kilkenny in an hour and a half. Brilliant. So yeah, really enjoyed coming to Ireland, I suppose, as tourists and, visiting the Northern Ireland and Dublin. And, so we did that. And then I suppose I got it into my head that I should probably work. So I said, right, the fun's over now, time to get a job. And I got a job as a producer in KCLR Live, which is the station here covering Carlow, Kilkenny. So we had a good few months of fun and games. And then things got serious in February 2020. So we went straight from the general election. My first day was actually producing a live political debate, which they often advise not to do in, your training for election coverage. But that was interesting. So we did that, and then weeks later we were in a pandemic. Yeah, live programming and trying to get our heads around how do we deal with that? Like you were saying, that balance. How much of this do we put on air? It's a 2 hour show. How much do we put on air? How do we manage this? How do we not scare people? And we were hearing stories of stuff that was happening behind the scenes that we couldn't possibly tell people because they would panic. You know, um, Things like certain buildings being set up as morgues. We knew there was talks of that happening, and we were going, crikey, we can't let people know that. That's terrifying. So, like, how much can we tell people? And it was very difficult. And I can't say that I enjoyed it. It was hard, and then having to produce a live show from home after a while with a baby, and baby going up and down the hallway, trying to break into rooms, and mommy's on a Zoom call, and there's a 3-year-old going around the place somewhere in the house. Don't know, because I'm on a call with 5 TDs on a Zoom call, going out to 25,000 people live, and hoping that nobody has hit my mute button. So so that was fun. But it was a great show, a fabulous show, and the power of local radio. I really understood how radio is that voice like a friend. And I suppose that sense of responsibility and duty that we had to our listeners. You couldn't feel anything but purpose in those times in radio, and just the feedback we got, and such a lonely time for people. And presenter understood that. And that was something she took very seriously. And she was that voice of comfort to old people in their kitchens, and that voice of hope to young people with jobs or leaving cert, and across all of the audiences. So it was important work. But again, like regional media, not enough investment, but that's another podcast, I think.
Yeah, it was a funny time. Fear was the currency to keep the country safe in a weird way. It's what they had to sell, and you had to convince people that you need to be fearful. And the more fearful you were, and unfortunately that fear took an awful long time to leave a lot of people, and I think some people are still scarred by it. But anyway,
it's an interesting point about the fear, because one of the things we figured out pretty quickly, that there was so much fear, and so we took a call to not be about the fear and be about the information instead. And so part of my job as producer was to completely set the running order and the agenda. What are we going to talk about? What's being discussed? And to vet people that we put on the show. And that meant nobody who was hysterical could go. If you were hysterical, you had to calm the heck down and come back to us next week, because people didn't need to hear that. Our focus and our purpose was very clear, just to provide information without that emotion. This was not about entertaining people. This was about providing information. But then we also started to provide coverage about other stuff. We were like, okay, we need to move on with life now. And here's our COVID section. Now we're moving on with the rest of the show. That was how we approached that.
Do you remember we all knew the R number and what the R number meant? Ooh, what's the R number today? Anything below 1 is good. Anything above 1 is not good. Wow, what a time! What a time! So, Fusion, come on, this bright, experienced person with all of this career stuff, my God Almighty, an amazing skill set and understanding and passion and all that kind of thing. Fusion, why?
I think it was destiny. I think it was fate, and I'm not into that plinky plonky stuff, but I've always stayed in touch with Dee, and I've always read your blogs and your posts and clicked from New Zealand or wherever it was, clicking and reading and just connecting with your content and the messaging that you had. It just always vibed with it. I was like, yep, 100%, Greg, love that, or what Dee was putting out, and just staying in touch, just we caught up, over the years. And for me, I loved comms. I loved just that ability to help businesses, and whether it's corporate communications or consumer, helping businesses. And the quick answer is, I did the comms thing on my own as a sole trader. It was great. I worked with loads and loads. I've worked with over 100 clients, everything from political to spiritual mediums, all sides of the scale. But for me, I'm a people person, and I need a team, and I love creative collaboration, and I like people, and I miss having a team. And I'm very fussy about what team I would put myself on, because you have to have the right team. And it just the time was right. I found myself in a position where I said, I'm really lonely working from home on my own, and I really would love a team. And at the same time, you guys were saying we would really love somebody on our team. So we had a chat, and there you go. That's the short answer. And here we are. And it is the right team. It is the right team. Your values are you're spot on. You haven't changed in that purpose for what you do, and that leadership is still there, you know, and that sense of purpose and mission about what you do has stayed and remained.
Totally, and we protect that by carefully choosing people who come onto the team. You know, welcome, Christine. Looking at media from the other side now, and there's been an awful lot of changes, but what would you say to people in a 2024 context? Our job is still the same. We're still trying to get the messages out there, but the vehicles for that have changed considerably. And you were in the middle of all that, and you witnessed so much of that change.
I suppose the different to take it from the different stakeholders here, we have the media, we have the clients and the business people, and then you have people who work in PR and comms, such as ourselves, you know, in bridging those relationships as well, you know. And then we have the audiences. So there's 4 people in this community as such that we're in, you know, and it's changed for all of them, you know. So for us, I think there are opportunities now. This is where our skills really start to become apparent for customers, people who are in business, people who are, you know, trying to reach and get their message out there, people who are really fed up of being invisible and want to be visible so that they can sell what they're trying to do, so that they can help people solve their problems, because that's why anyone goes into business, right? They want to help people solve problems. But it's hard to solve someone's problem if you can't talk to them, you know. It's hard to if you can't reach them. So that's what we do. And I think now more than ever, you need those diverse skills. You need those diverse personalities and types of people on your team with those diverse skills in order to achieve that for clients. You know, it is very complicated. It is very daunting. It's intimidating. Google ads and social media ads and PR and putting yourself out there in a media context or presentation, like this podcast, the whole thing. There's so many offerings now. It is terrifying, but it's also full of opportunity. You know, we're consuming our audience, to go to that member of this community. The audience is consuming media in different ways. Journalism isn't going anywhere. You know, content isn't going anywhere. It's just being consumed in different ways. So our job is to find the right platform with the right content for that platform to meet the right audience for whatever client and customer that is. And I think now more than ever, you need the skills. You know, if you can afford it in your budget and prioritize it in your budget to get people with those real skills to help you along the journey, you know, I think it's a really important part of your business. It should definitely be factored in, you know. But for media too, that has changed, and I'm seeing that, you know, it can be difficult, you know, to reach media. Things have changed. You know, if you think about journalists, they're not getting paid. Some of them aren't getting paid a lot of money. You know, they're now having to upload all of their stories onto the internet, onto the, you know, WordPress websites, or, you know, they have to do all of that as well as tweet and put out all their stuff on social media. So the workload has increased. Their newsroom capacity, you know, the team has probably shrunk. There's just so much on them. So the days of having journalists pop along for a coffee to an event and stuff, it's difficult because they don't have time, you know. So we have to evolve constantly in our industry, and we have to have real relationships with journalists, that we understand what they need and how we can help them, and it's a win-win. Then everyone's happy, you know. Journalists have an ear to the ground and information, clients have visibility, and we get to do the work that we love and hopefully are good at and continue to get better at, you know. It's a long answer, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't long at all. But having the likes of you and the team to help our team to understand that relationship is so important. I always think we're like the tradesman who rocks up, there's a problem in the house, and whatever it is, you open your toolkit and you pick the right tools for that job. And invariably with the stuff that we do, it's a combination of those tools, and knowing what to use when and the sequence that you use them and all that kind of stuff is really important. You wrote a really nice blog post. It's on the Fusion blog, and don't shrink to fit. What did you mean?
Again, it comes back to interest in people and how they communicate, and how we as humans constantly, I don't know if it's just me or does everybody do it, you know, just kind of reevaluate ourselves, you know, just check in with ourselves and go, am I being the person I want to be? Could I be better? Can I do better? You know, am I doing the work I want to do? Just always just recalibrate, you know. I think don't shrink to fit is the best advice I ever got, you know. And I think in media, a lot of us have these big, loud personalities, you know, chatty, and you have to bring that to work. You have to bring that to your relationships at home, you have to be authentic to yourself. But also, I think we're all coming under pressure to maybe over edit ourselves a little bit. And I suppose I was just posing the question is, how do we present ourselves in a way that doesn't offend too much, but that how can we be ourselves and be unique and be different and be whatever it is that we are, while also shaving off those rough edges that we need to, maybe softening some edges and sharpening some others. So it's just that question about, have we shrunk ourselves a little bit too much? Because then we all look the same and sound the same. And then you're generally, to come back to win happy, in order to win happy, you really have to be yourself. But that doesn't mean we don't change ourselves or adjust ourselves a little bit, but the essence of who you are has to stay the same. And the advice actually came from a business consultant that was a client of mine, and it didn't do her any harm. Her advice worked for her. She was a potty mouth. She used swear words in her content, which just, she was very informal in her style of communications, regularly cursed. And I mean, I got her a lot of TV gigs as well, and she was just absolutely lapped up by the media, and her audience and her clients just absolutely loved her because of this. She was like your friend. She was genuine, but then she repelled a lot of people, so repel to attract was her thing as well. Other people mightn't like that. So I'm just posing the question, have we over edited ourselves? How do we strike that balance?
Yeah, and you're not making an argument for, say what the hell you want to whoever you want and behave how you want at any time. But I think you were saying, don't sacrifice yourself. We get one shot at this lovely thing called life, and you owe it to yourself to kind of live it and bring all of yourself to whatever you're doing, be it work or your personal life and everything else. What's happiness to you?
What's happiness? I think it's probably the relationship I have with myself. It's the most important relationship I have in my life, really. And as long as I'm happy with how I'm treating myself and the life that I'm giving myself and allowing myself to live, and how that flows down to the relationships that I have with the people in my life, Yeah, it's probably just having a good relationship with myself. And then I suppose the other side of it as well is that I'm doing, like I said, we only have this one life. Am I living it the way I want to live? Like, am I making the best out of it? I suppose to go back to my earlier story, about my parents passed away. And one of the things that came from that is that real sense of mortality. So don't waste time doing stuff that you don't want to do, So I don't waste time doing anything. Everything in my life I'm doing because I want to do, my polytunnel, my little bit of veggies out and standing in the grass for 5 minutes before I start work. All these things that I do make me happy. Little rituals, little surrounding myself with people that are positive and good, and having compassion for people who don't fit into that. Just being generally kind, I think. But yeah, success then is really about just making sure that I'm living that life. And sometimes that has to come at a sacrifice to something else, So sometimes my career has to sacrifice in order that I can have a happy family life, and the other way around as well,
Yeah, and in terms of winning, I always kind of give this analogy of playing a football match, and if there were no goalposts, it would be pretty pointless and you get very bored after a while. There's always that feeling when the ball hits the back of the net, that those moments of elation. So for you, in terms of winning, kind of now and going forward, when do you feel like, yes, yeah, I'm winning there. That's cool.
Yeah, it's probably that lovely outwardly expression of delight from either my kids or my husband or, clients, and getting results, from a work perspective. I love, when we start at the start of a project and we have objectives and we set those goals, and that's the roadmap. We're not too rigid, but there's our map, and we get to that destination, and all those milestones along the way, it's progressing. That's a buzz. That's great, and you see the results that clients are getting, and they're getting exactly what they wanted from this whole thing and the whole process. That's a buzz, and I think just really winning is just every day, just doing what I feel is my purpose, just finding your purpose as a human, and just doing that, and just, there you go. This is what I do for a job. Like, is my purpose is to help people communicate and help them realize their purpose. So that's essentially what you're doing. Like, it's, people in business are humans, they all started their business or do that job because it's their purpose. That's what they want to do. And if we can help them feel better about that and achieve that for them, great. That's fantastic. It's not this clinical, oh, we're all in business, nobody cares. We're all humans. Like, that's that we're all trying to achieve our goals,
Of course we are. And my very last question, the small things every day that put a smile on your face? What are they?
The first cucumber. Yay! In my polytunnel. She's just popped out to say hello. Yeah, the cucumbers. And do you know what I love? I grow everything from seed. I love my polytunnel. And it's something I started doing about 3 years ago, gardening. I'm not great at it, but I'm not terrible either. And I do it because it slows me down. And there's a patience involved. And it's ultimate optimism because you're just putting the seed into dirt. Like you just trust. You have to trust that this is going to work. And it takes patience. And when you see that little bit of green pop out, oh, I just love it. Love it. It's so sad. I just love it. Like, and yeah, and just like having a salad and like, I grew this in my dirt, that's a buzz, Roller skating. I like roller skating. I still roller skate. I played roller derby for years and played for a team in New Zealand. Yeah, I like that. Still do a bit of roller skating. I don't do roller derby anymore, but I do skate around the house like a weirdo in front of everybody. Don't shrink to fit.
Okay, so for anyone who's rocking past your house, you see this strange creature whizzing around, that's Christine Tobin.
Grab a skateboard, join me. Yeah.
Christine, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. That was amazing, and we got to know you. It's funny, actually. I'm just having a little thought. And in the normal work scenario, people join the team and you do the interviews and we go for dinner and all that kind of thing. And that's all well and good, and you get to know someone to a point. But when you do something like what we've just done and have a very deliberate conversation where you really want to try and get the A to Z of someone, you learn so much more. And I don't know, maybe we all need to find a way of finding all of that out about the people we spend loads of time with, like our work colleagues and everything. Because we should find those opportunities, shouldn't we?
Absolutely. Like you talked earlier about connection, and part of what we do at Fusion as well is we offer people ability and the method and mediums to connect with their audience, to connect with the people they're trying to help, and those connections. And, I suppose I can't very well tell people and train people how to tell their story and talk and say, the importance of your story is, if I don't do it myself, if I can't share my story, then how can I tell somebody else and that I'm working with that it's important to tell your story? Let people know who you are as a business owner. Be you, if I don't do that myself. If we don't do it ourselves and we don't share a little bit of ourselves, then how can we expect others to do it?
Thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity, Greg.
Yeah, cool. We'll chat again. Thank you for listening to the Win Happy podcast, which has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email at greg@fusion.ie. So until next time, take it easy.